Hello everybody, and welcome to my newest video. As you may have seen from both the title and the thumbnail, we're going to be looking at the Nintendo DSi. The Nintendo DSi wasn't particularly notable when it first released due to the 3DS at the time overshadowing it, but let's take a look back at it and see whether it was good value then. And of course we're going to explore a little bit what it's like now. Let's begin with its release date. I'm going to use the UK release date for everything I mention in this video, as I currently live in the UK and always have done. So, it released on April 3rd, 2009. The 3DS being released only 2 years later. That sounds like plenty of time to sell people on the idea of the DSi, but most people already owned another variant of the DS Lite, and felt no need for any upgrade. But if the 3DS released even just a couple of years later than it did, the DSi might have had a larger footprint in Nintendo's history books, but either way, the features were actually quite compelling for the time. The main selling point being the camera. As you'll see in this video, when I put up a few photos, the camera certainly isn't the greatest, but it was pretty awesome for 2009, and I still enjoy using it today sometimes. I can't show you many photos as most of them show people or places that you all don't need to know, but the ones you will see were all taken on my DSi. According to many tech websites, the camera is 640 by 480 pixels and 0.3 megapixels. Due to my lack of knowledge for cameras, I can't necessarily comment on how good or bad they are, but in comparison to the iPhone 3GS, which was released on June 19th, 2009, just around accurately 2 months after the DSi, it had a 3 megapixel camera, 10 times higher megapixel rate than the DSi, which is quite the difference to say the short time difference between their release dates. However, for a kid, the camera would have been incredible and really cool, and a lot cheaper than buying a regular phone. It came with effects you could use and frames to put on your photos. There's not really much point comparing it to newer devices such as the iPhone X, as the camera would have been paltry. Personally, I find the DSi to be wildly more comfortable than the DS Lite. Not necessarily in its form factor, but mainly due to its more clicky buttons. The buttons are more akin to the newly released Nintendo Switch and its Joy-Cons. Whilst I used to love the softer buttons of the DS Lite as a kid, I've recently found that the DSi's clicky feeling buttons are much more satisfying and fun to play with. The screen size was no difference to its predecessor, the DS Lite. The brightness settings could go up a little bit higher, but not anything particularly notable, or anything that could be a selling point for the DSi. Battery life was certainly worse than the DS Lite, especially on a super high brightness. However, it tended to charge around half an hour faster, as I've seen online. The DS Lite's battery lasted a whopping 15 to 19 hours, whereas the DSi lasted a slightly less impressive 14 to 17 hours. However, both these numbers are very impressive considering Nintendo's newer consoles' battery lives, but we won't get into that now. The DSi shop is currently closed and will be until, well, the end of time really, unless we have a nuclear apocalypse and Nintendo decides to bring it back. But most games are now available on the 3DS eShop. The DSi shop was pretty cool. If you had a couple of spare quid, you just grab something off the DSi shop, get an Animal Crossing alarm, a Mario calculator, or an actual game, such as Mario and the Minis, or the incredibly cool Photo Dojo. I'd recommend you check that one out. Sadly, it's now closed, but all good things must come to an end, including the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection, the GTS, and many others. Next up, we have the Nintendo DSi Sounds application. You could use this to record you and your friends making dumb jokes, your grandparents making possibly racist comments, or anything else you felt like. Now, if your grandparents making racist comments isn't your idea of a childhood in the UK, then you probably grew up in some posh area like Oxford. No, I'm kidding. The coolest part of this application was that you could... Anyway, so the coolest part of the actual Nintendo Sounds application was that you could download music on a computer, put it on an SD card, put said SD card into your DSi, and boom, you've now got an MP3 player that plays games. It's really cool. I tried it out again recently actually, and it's pretty awesome. It's actually quite useful. Plus, whilst listening, you could switch between multiple little modes, which showed different things. One of the coolest being an Excitebike one, which allowed the two characters to have to navigate over the hills. The hills went as high as the pitch, I believe it was the pitch, of your song, as your song did. At the end of the song, you got to see who won. There are others such as a spaceship or a pond where little rain droplets would drop on to the pond depending on, I believe, the pitch. You could also press the L and R buttons to play little sounds such as your hands clapping, drums and cymbals, don't have those so I can't do that, and many others. With both your music and your voice recordings, you could change the pitch and speed to make the songs or your friends sound funny. You could also press an option which allowed sound to sound like either a radio, an 8-bit game, an echo, or an instrumental, which removed all vocals from the song you were listening to. The PictoChat application returns yet again. From the past two DS iterations, Jesus Christ. It allowed you and your friends to connect if you were close to each other, and draw fun pictures or type messages to each other. It was just fun to draw dumb pictures and send it to your friends. Nintendo DS Download Play makes a return, which we discussed just a little bit in the last video. This was where, if your friend had a game that allowed multiplayer, you could go onto the application and join them for some multiplayer fun without having to necessarily buy the game. Or in the case of some games, such as New Super Mario Bros., you could verse each other and see who died first. Me and my friend used to fight over who got to be Luigi, as we both wanted to play as him. Now I look back at it, it's hilarious to me, and I guess I wish I could go back to that time in some way, as everything was so simple. But back then, that fight was some real shizzle. The DSi also had to use a separate charger from the DS Lite, which the 3DS and its variants still continue to use to this day. The main downfall of the DSi was its removal of the Game Boy Advance game slot, which is a massive blow to retro gamers like myself and kids back in 2009 who like to play both types of games, as in having to carry one handheld around was way more convenient than two, and I doubt that parents would have gone out and bought a new system for their kids only to complain that they had to now take around their Game Boy Advance as well. I think the DSi was a cool addition in the DS line, and I personally prefer it to the DS Lite. However, nowadays, if you want to pick up a version of the DS Lite and don't have the money to pick up both, I'd recommend the DS Lite, if you don't already own a Game Boy Advance, as it does have Game Boy Advance game backwards compatibility, and of course you can play DS games on it. If you couldn't, that would be quite the scam. And the DSi's features, most, if not all, aren't too groundbreaking nowadays. You can use music streaming services offline, and most, if not all, current phones have a way better camera than the DSi. You'd be hard pressed to find one that's available to buy nowadays from a regular retailer that has a worse camera than the DSi. In fact, I think it would be borderlining on impossible unless you bought some really dodgy camera from Poundland, which I'm sure you could probably do, or Pound World, or any other pound shop you have near you. However, the handheld was certainly very cool, and it's an awesome footnote in Nintendo's handheld history, which I felt was certainly worth discussing. Maybe some of you never got to try out the Nintendo DSi, maybe some of you wanted to as a kid but your parents wouldn't buy it for you or couldn't afford it, maybe some of you just thought it was stupid and didn't feel the need for a new system, and maybe some of you saw it, but by the time you did, the 3DS was already out and you wanted that instead, and all of those are fair enough reasons not to buy it. I only picked up one recently, as I personally grew up with a DS Lite. So did my grandpa too, which is funny. But yeah, I think it's pretty cool. And I'd recommend picking it up if, of course, you actually can. If it's too expensive for you, or you just don't want to because you prefer maybe the softer buttons of the DS Lite, or just the fact that you can take that around and play Game Boy Advance and DS games at the same time, I don't blame you at all. It's fair enough. And personally, I just really like the clicky buttons of it. And actually recently I picked up a Zekrom and Reshiram Pokemon Black and White Edition DS Lite. Not DS Lite, DSi. And that's actually the main reason that I ever picked up a DSi, because I wanted the limited edition and they had it at a local second-hand shop near where I lived. I thought, why not? And purchased it. I got it for my birthday, so it was pretty cool. And yeah, I just thought it was really awesome, and I thought the DSi was something worth discussing, as I don't see it talked about much nowadays, and whilst that's fair enough, as the DS Lite and the original DS made much more of a footprint in people's lives and Nintendo's history, I still thought it was worth reviewing. I hope you very much enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to leave a like, subscribe, press the bell thing, whatever you want to do, and I'm sorry you can't comment down below, but this video has to be set for kids, otherwise I'll probably get sued, because if I put it for not for kids, which it probably is, because I doubt most kids want to hear a review of a DSi, but I have to because it's Nintendo, and then they'll get sued by frickin' FCC. So, frickin' FCC. So either way, I kind of have to set it as that. But I hope you enjoyed the video nonetheless. If you did, and you did want to leave some feedback or video suggestions, feel free to do it on my Instagram, which is IzzyKidYT. Yeah, there's nothing special about it, just search it up, I'll come up with my picture, the same profile pictures I've got on my channel, and I post each time I upload, which is obviously Wednesday and Sundays at 8 PM. So feel free to comment on those posts if you've got any suggestions, anything you'd like me to review, anything really, feel free, say whatever, I'm not bothered. So yeah, I hope you have really enjoyed this video, and if you have, then definitely comment, and I forgot I can't say that anymore, comment on my Instagram post, subscribe, like, all that chisel, whatever you want to do. I hope you have enjoyed it, and if you did, feel free to subscribe, because I'd love to see more of you watching these videos, as I do put a fair amount of time in them, but of course. I hope you enjoyed this video, I hope you have an incredible day, and I hope that you're really happy today, tomorrow, every day. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.